So again, my name is Greg Dirks. I'm the city manager for the city of Wood Village. Definitely hide that. Caroline, how do I turn that or hide that? That's a new one. Thanks. All right, try that again. All right, so again, my name is Greg Dirks. I'm the city manager for Wood Village. Thanks you so much for braving the cold, the wind, the dark to be here this evening. You've probably seen in our newsletters talking about fire and EMS for a while. You probably saw a postcard, got a phone call from a pollster asking about potential levy, and I'm sure that's what brought a lot of you here this evening, is wondering, great, what does that really mean for me? We're going to answer hopefully most of your questions, but certainly give you a lot more background and details of why we're here and what that all means, and then what some next steps are. So what I want us first is we're here to provide information certainly about fire and EMS, just a little bit of property taxes, but then certainly work of if the council refers a levy, what does that mean, what it could mean for you, and then just ongoing work that we are doing with our regional partners of fire and EMS to improve the service, cost sustainable for the future, so we don't have to keep bringing this back up year after year. And then it's about a 25 or so minute presentation I have, and then it'll be just open for your questions and things at the end. Happy to answer as much as we can this evening. There will probably be some things that we can't answer off the cuff, but again, we have some notepads in the back if you want to leave like an email or contact information. We're happy to send you information as much or as little as some people may want, just so you can feel good about the information you have. One thing we're here to do is not to convince you that a levy is or isn't a good thing. This is more of just why we're having the conversation, kind of what led to this moment. So it's really what the council has been discussing over the past about 2 years, what we're doing with our regional partners, and how that coalesces to this evening. And we didn't want you to hear about it from the newspaper, social media. We just wanted to let you hear it from us first, of kind of the why and the what. Hopefully then you can share it with your friends and family and neighbors. Again, if you love the information, hate the information, share it how you so please. But we just didn't want you to hear it through the grapevine, at least give you opportunity to hear it from us first. So we want to talk just real briefly on how fire and the fire side of EMS is provided in the city. So for 30 years, it's been provided through a contract, an intergovernmental agreement with the city of Gresham and the Gresham Fire Department. Before that, the area cities had belonged to what was called Fire District 10. It still exists as an entity, but it's been contracted out its services for actually over 40 years. At that time, the costs were really increasing rapidly for the fire district's costs. There weren't the property tax, I'll call it protections that are in place then, so they were getting rapidly increasing rates, if those who were around in the early 90s remember. And so Gresham came to the three cities, said, hey, we think we can serve you as well, if not better, for less cost, because we were able to get the cost somewhere between the average cost and marginal cost for Gresham to expand into the three cities. And that worked really, really well for 30 years. And then it no longer worked. When you look at the cost of fire, which we'll go into a little bit here shortly, they were escalating a lot. And it's not just Gresham, but area fire districts, fire departments, fire services. There's no longer what I call a value service to buy. Gresham can no longer afford to give us that cost between like the average cost of the service or marginal cost, and no one else can either. So just the cost of the service is just up, and there's no other place to buy a lesser cost. We want to talk a little bit about response times and just the increasing demand that we've seen over time and the increasing change of nature of calls. So what does the fire service do? Well, obviously fights fires in our community. I think that's the easy one. Most of what they do, though, is emergency medical services and responding to, basic life support calls, advanced life support calls. That's where you'll see them in a lot of times at traffic collisions or just at someone's home when there is no fire, they're responding. And usually, I think in over 90% of the cases, are the first to respond ahead of an ambulance. As I said, they do respond to traffic collisions if they need, to extract someone or someone's. Hazardous material response, everything from a fuel leak at a gas station to maybe a natural gas line was hit, to hopefully what never happens is something on the railroad or the river. Increasing over the years, it's wildfires, whether it's in the area forests around us, but even in our natural spaces. We're seeing more and more with our hotter and drier summers, just a lot more fires in our natural spaces. And then through the fire marshal office, it's more fire prevention, and whether that's through our building and permit and inspection process, inspections just at area businesses, just making sure homes and businesses are generally safe. So that's in a Cliff Notes version of what fire does. Now, how they do it, again, this is a high level summary because every incident is different, but let's just take a serious medical incident. Heart attack, for example, which unfortunately East County has one of the highest rates in the country. Not so much Wood Village per se, but East County as a whole, we get a lot of heart attacks. That takes 2 fire units. Now that's not 2 fire personnel, so it's you get a rescue unit and probably an engine. So it's typically 5 people responding to 1 heart attack because you got someone doing chest compression, someone helping do the breathing, someone checking vitals, someone coordinating with the ambulance, and someone getting information from the household member or loved one. And then you need to rotate those out because doing chest compressions for a while, your arms get tired. So cardiac arrest, you're getting 5 personnel there. You take that traffic collision, you could have upwards of 10 or more people, especially if there's extraction needed, so they get the jaws of life out. If you've been to our night out a couple years ago, we used to do a quick demo of that. So you got people tactfully taking apart a car so they can safely extract the person. That person or persons still may need medical help or assistance. It's a car wreck. There could be fuel, oil, risk of fire. So that's where that's 10 or more people for a traffic collision. When we start moving into actual fires, which luckily are relatively few and far between, but we even just had one in Gresham today at a large apartment complex fire. But for a single family home, so that's here in the original village or in the upper village, you're getting over 16 people because if you got people inside or unknown if they're inside, you need firefighters to go in and firefighters outside to back them up. And because rescue them, you have people inside and outside trying to fight the fire, and then coordinate, who's doing the hoses, who's getting the hydrants. Ideally, in the perfect world, stove caught on fire. Fire department's here really fast. It doesn't go beyond the stove. You're not getting 16 people show up. You might getting 1 or 2 engines, so 6 or so people. It's out in a few minutes. All is well. I'll have to buy a new stove. For your apartment fires, again, you're getting well over 20, and that's just because the risk is greater. Risk is greater to those who are living there, the spread to other units, the firefighters, if it's on the upper floor, rescuing, everything's just compounded. And same with the commercial fire, whether it's maybe at a big box store where we don't know if there are customers or guests still inside, or at a large warehouse where people don't know Johnny's still in there, or there's a lot of combustibles and dangerous things. So you could get well over 30 people at apartment or commercial fires. So very quick about what they do, how they do it. We've had some questions though about well, who pays? Because that can be a little complicated when we're talking about like fire and EMS, and then the ambulance side of the equation, which is a separate piece of this. So let's just use that heart attack, for example. We'll call 911, they dispatch, the fire and ambulance. Again, fire typically gets there first by a bit, and they're going to start that basic and advanced life-saving support. Ambulance shows up, stabilize, get the person to hospital. Let's use that traffic crash or just a simple fire incident. Ambulance may or may not be called or dispatched at the time of the 911 call. Fire would say, oh, no, we don't need it. Everyone's fine. Simple stove fire, or no, little fender bender. Or it's like, no, we need ambulance. We need transport. All that to say is when fire shows up, and whether they're fighting a fire or providing medical support, you never get a bill from fire. You don't get a bill from the city. So to say, stove fire department comes, you don't get a bill for that. That's just you pay for that. Let's just say though, oh, stove fire, inhaled a lot of smoke, I'm not doing well, ambulance shows up, take it to hospital. Ambulance is a private company overseen by the county. They will probably bill you or your insurance. That money doesn't go to the city. That money doesn't go to the fire department. That money goes somewhere between AMR, which is the contracted provider, and the county. We don't know. We're not party to it. There's a lot of issues between the interconnection between fire, the county, and ambulance. We are actually working with our state legislators to fix some of that because it's very broken. Outside the scope of what we're talking about here this evening, but we know there are gaps to that. But we wanted to let you know that, yes, sometimes when fire and ambulance show up, you get a bill. The bill is not from the city and it's not from fire. It's from the ambulance service, which is a private company overseen, contracted by the county. So a little bit about call volume. So 30 plus years ago, obviously all the communities were smaller, but we still had fewer incidents. When you looked at 2020, because that was a year of some good data, albeit, yep, there was an increase in calls, there was COVID, there were some anomalies, but could really see the difference just in total call volume, especially with the EMS side of calls, emergency medical services. So fires, yes, they doubled, but EMS almost quadrupled. And then you think, okay, but 2020, I mean, that was a weird year. Well, 2024, it keeps increasing, especially with the medical calls. And not to put them on the spot, but if you have questions about kind of the trends, we do have our fire chief here and another person from the command staff that can answer maybe some more of those detailed questions. But, you know, generally, it's a lot more medical calls that we're seeing and a lot more responses from those people. Again, not to put them on the spot, but they're the experts. They see it, they live it. I get the data. And like, okay, Greg, that's great for the greater four-city region. What does that mean for Wood Village? So over a year ago, the 3 cities contracted with a company to evaluate what does it take for our fire and EMS system? What's the demand and what are options to fill that demand? And through terms of that work, they created a heat map of calls. So the brighter yellow, the higher the call volume. Well, for Wood Village, which is here, not surprising, it's pretty much the center of the city. You know, it's near the freeway, 238th and Halsey. That's unfortunately a high crash corridor. It's also where the bulk of our more dense housing is, so you just concentrate in the calls. So it's not like apartments are generating more calls than a neighborhood, but they're just more densely populated. So we have a lot of calls. Now, when we think about response time, it's everything from when you pick up the phone to call 911, and yet there are some issues with 911, especially the last few years. Slower hold time, slower response times. That's getting better. Still not where we want it, but we're seeing really good progress with hold times decreasing and call processing time decreasing. So it's going in the right direction. But, you know, that could take, you know, a minute, 90 seconds. Turnout time. So turnout time is when the fire department gets the call, says, you know, kitchen fire or car wreck or heart attack. So it's firefighters stop whatever they were doing, get on their gear, get in the trucks and leave. So it's from the time they get the call at the station to when the trucks roll out the driveway. And then there's travel time, and that's traffic and geography. So you could have the best call center in the country, the best turnout times, but if your stations are too far apart and traffic's too dense, you're adding up minutes. So we looked at travel time because you really want a travel time of less than 5 minutes. And now this is a slightly different zoomed out map from the hotspot map, but Wood Village sits right here. And so the majority of all our calls are well outside of a 5-minute travel time. So again, that's not necessarily including the 911 or turnout, but this is just the trucks leave a station because it's geography. This is the station up in Troutdale by the post office. This is that station kind of at the Gresham area off Halsey, and this is the station right by Gresham City Hall, just for reference of where these stations are. Those are the closest to us. And there isn't a station here to, you know, drive here quickly. Well, this is a map that Gresham Fire did because as we're all working together on how to provide this service in a cost-effective and efficient and best manner, you know, what would a new station kind of between Wood Village and Fairview do? So everything in this red and pink is now within a 5-minute or less drive time. So all of Wood Village is now covered in less than 5 minutes. So figure, you know, a minute and change for your 911 call, minute and change for, you know, the turnout time, getting out the door. You're within a couple minutes now of your drive time. So a new station is a remarkable thing. It also just doesn't help Wood Village because you see this overlap. So now these other stations, they don't have to go to these calls anymore. They can focus on some of these other calls. Or if there's multiple alarm fire, they're even that much closer. So it shares the load, and for the whole system actually increases what's called its reliability. So now more stations can more reliably respond in a faster time. Why does that matter? I think for fire, it's pretty clear. The longer fire burns, the more it grows, the more it spreads. So again, you can get that, oh no, my stove is on fire. It's knocked out in a few minutes. Again, some smoke in the house and you got to clean it up, but you didn't lose your home. Heart attack. This is from the American Heart Association. For every minute without CPR or defibrillation, your survival decreases 7 to 10% a minute. So if you can get to a person within that 4 to 6 minute window, the chance of survival greatly increase. Same with stroke or very critical injuries, traumatic injuries. I think there's a lot of studies showed a number of things, but it's pretty consistent that on-scene stabilization for some of those very serious medical things increases survival even better than rapid transport to hospital, because you stabilize the person in place and then can get to like a trauma center or a specialty hospital. So all that to say is getting to someone quickly matters. It seems obvious, but it's nice to just point out, it's not just me saying it. There's been some studies. So if we're thinking, our little region here is 4 cities, overall we actually need 2 stations. So right now we have what we call 6 1/3. The third is Gresham shares a station with Portland, kind of on the west end of Gresham, on the east end of Portland. So we have 6 1/3. Now we actually we need 8 1/3. So we'd have the one kind of the Wood Village Fairview area, and then one on the south side of Gresham. I call it Pleasant Valley area. I'm not sure if that's exactly where, but somewhere in that kind of southern area. So it's not just the station. Well, then there's personnel to be in the station. There's new equipment. It's the trucks, it's the gear, it's the stuff. So it is a real investment, and it's a real need. Okay, well, that's great, Greg. Thanks. How does it get paid? Well, property taxes. And I'm just going to spend a few minutes on property taxes. But we're happy to, again, share more information if that's a thing of interest. But as some of you probably remember, in the early 90s, measures 5 and 50. So before those measures, a government entity, whether it's a city, school district, special district, could say, here's our budget, turn it into the county. County says, okay, that's the rate for that area which they're in. And there was no limit. There's no cap. You could spend $10 million one year, $50 million the next, and then back to 7. There was no framework to put it in, per se. Understandably, people didn't like that, and there was a couple referendums and initiative petitions to put some framework around it. One of which was essentially establishing a permanent rate for all taxing jurisdictions. Again, cities, schools, special districts. For the city, it's locked in at $3.12 per thousand. That cannot be changed. Even if you, the voter, say, no, we'll chip in a little bit more. Can't do it. The permanent rate is the permanent rate. And then Measure 50 set up, basically it decoupled your market value from your taxable assessed value. And it set up what was called an assessed value. So if your home was built before 1997, your assessed value was whatever your value was in 1995 and is now indexed at 3% a year. Can't change. If your home was built after 1997, the change property ratio was applied to it. What that attempts to do is tax your home or property similar to other similar properties in a defined geographic region. And up until a few years ago, that was all of Multnomah County. So a new home built in Wood Village was assessed the average of a very similar home throughout the county. Through legislation, the smaller cities in the county got that changed to be within the same city. So what it did is essentially it created a permanent rate and set a limit of a growth of 3% per year. And also then set up assessed value versus market value. You are always taxed on the lower of the two, and more often than not, it's always the assessed value. Except during the recession, that 2010 era, and even then only a few homes had assessed value greater than their market value. So generally, you're taxed on your assessed value, which is not even related to your market value. So when we talk about property taxes and public safety costs, when you look at year 2000, which is a few years after those measures took place and things kind of stabilized, the city, this is actual city revenue, had more than enough to cover police, fire, 911. So more for parks, more for planning, just more for stuff. You fast forward to where we are today. Yep, property taxes have grown, but so has police, fire, and 911. Again, fire, as we talked about, we just couldn't get the value rate we've been getting, and there isn't one to get. So this is the going rate for fire. And instead of having, a bit of a surplus, there's over $400,000 gap, and that gap is increasing. So we're not here to say you aren't paying enough in property taxes. We're just saying that property taxes no longer pay just for police, fire, 911. So we're not alone in this. All the other area cities are facing this. Actually, cities throughout the state are facing this. Have oh, this city had this levy or this city had this fee. So for example, not comparing us to Troutdale or Fairview or Gresham, but they've got a public safety fee. Gresham also passed a public safety levy to help, because they're in the same, they've got the same gap. So we're all working together towards how do we solve this problem. And we've come to the conclusion that a fire district, creating a new taxing entity, is probably the best method. It won't necessarily cost less. We won't be able to go back in time to this, but it should avoid this. And then that way we but how we do the district, that's where the cities are all working together with is it a new district? Is it consolidated into an existing district? Is it trying to revamp District 10 into something? So we're working on that now, but it takes a bit of time. I've got another slide on that later. But in the meantime, we've got that gap today. For this current fiscal year, the city said, well, we'll just use savings to pay for it because we want to have an opportunity to understand what the future may mean, what it may look like, and be able to have conversations with you all and see what's important to you all. It's likely, and that's because I don't say it will, but it's very likely there'll be some sort of ballot measure on the May ballot for you to vote on of some level of levy, and we'll get into what we're thinking of right now. But again, it's not been referred, it's not set in stone. We want opportunities to talk with you all to hear your thoughts and concerns. Also, so we're working together to make a district. Great. Okay, we're going to need some more resource. Not so great. Well, we also want to find a way to fill that service gap, reduce those travel times and find a way to even have a temporary kind of fire station in the Wood Village Fairview area. So we don't like the messaging of, yeah, you're gonna have to pay more and you're not getting more. We like the messaging of, yeah, we got to pay more, but we want to give you something more. And I've talked about that in a second here. I know most of you hear about the levy, so let's talk about that. So an operating levy, it doesn't add to your permanent rate, because it's only for 5 years. It has to be approved by the voters. So it is added to your property taxes. It's not like a monthly bill, even though you may hear about it costs X per month. There's no monthly bill, it's just your property tax bill. It only lasts for 5 years. So if the voters approve it, great. And then if they don't choose to renew it, it just goes away. And it's up to people like myself and our electeds to figure out what that means and what to do. So again, likely you'll see something on the May 2026 election, because again, even if the council refers this, it's you all, the community, that says yes or no. We don't say yes or no. And we just want to let you know that the voter registration deadline is April 28th, and you can go to that website there to make sure you are registered to vote. We also have paper pamphlets in the back to make sure you're registered for vote. We like voters here, however you choose to vote. So what is the levy? So to make up that gap, it's $1.35 per thousand of assessed value. So again, assessed value is not your market value. And I've got a slide where you can find your assessed value if you threw away your tax statement in anger. Don't blame you. But for your average single family home, so take just the home in the original village, its average assessed value is $221,000 and a little bit of change. Now that's the average. So some are going to be a little bit more, some are going to be a little bit less. But at the average, it's about $300 a year or $25 a month. So it's not nothing. It is quite substantial. Now, manufactured homes, they're treated a little differently, and we can't really get an average of those. They're actually treated as personal property, with the first $50,000 actually exempted by the county. But even if you, own your manufactured home, often you're renting your space. Well, the state put in rent caps for space. So that's limited at 6% for large parks, that's 30 units or more. Smaller parks have a total cap of 10%. So why I bring that up is because even if you may not own your home or property, maybe you're a renter, I never like to say that you don't pay property tax because in some manner or form, you indirectly pay through your rent. But I did want to bring up that Oregon has put in some measures of rent caps. But that may just mean now your landlord's paying a bit more on property tax and not updating parts of the home. Those are just harder ones to articulate because we don't know what an owner is going to do. But there also has apartment and rental home rent caps of essentially it's capped at 10% for units 15 years or older, no cap on newer units. So again, if you own a home, the average is about $25 a month. I do have information here. We can look that up. Again, if you threw away your tax bill, you can either, these are QR codes you could scan right now, or the links are down below. I actually prefer Portland maps because it's an actual map. You can see your home, you can click on it, get all the details. The Multnomah County property tax one can be a little funky, that you have to put in your address in a very specific way, like Cedar Lane, you don't spell lane, you put LN. If you put Cedar Lane, it says you property doesn't exist. So I just find clicking on a map easier. You just kind of drill down to assessor information, has what your assessed value is. And so if your assessed value is, 220,000, you want to divide that by 1,000 first because it's per 1,000. So it'd be 220 times $1.35. Or whatever your assessed value is. If it's 300,000 is your assessed value, divide by 1,000 times by $1.35. So we've also had some questions. Well, what if this doesn't pass? Cities are required by law to have a balanced budget, and like your budgets at home, sometimes you've got more expenses than income, so you've got to make hard choices, take out a loan, use your savings, not fun things. Cities are the same way. Our public safety gap, like I said, for this year, we chose to use a bit of savings, and we have still a bit of savings, but savings will run out if we can't find a way to at least slow the gap or fill the gap. The amount we're talking about, because some people said, well, what if you just mow the park one day less a week or don't pick up trash all the time? It's over $400,000 gap. That's all of our parks maintenance. So that's not mowing once a week. We no longer mow it. We can't subsidize planning fees, permit fees, which we do update those every 12 to 18 months, try to keep up with inflation, but especially for some of the lower level planning costs or permit fees, we subsidize it with the general fund. So if you want to replace a water heater or furnace, you're not spending hundreds of dollars just on a permit. It's a reasonable amount to encourage you to get the permit so it can get inspected to make sure that it's done safely and your home won't blow up. Things like recreation, we can't afford. So I don't like saying doom and gloom, but we've also got questions of, well, what do we give up if we can't, police and fire 911 are very important. We have to have those. So what would we have to give up if we can't fund the gap? That's just a very high level. But again, we've got some savings for a bit. But savings used today for operating aren't then here for either a future rainy day, or as I'll talk about in a second, if we're trying to partner with our other area cities and build a temporary station, that costs money, and Gresham can't afford to build a station in Wood Village or Fairview, and so we all need to kind of come together and use monies to do that. So, as I said, we actually are working with Gresham on a temporary station, kind of in the Wood Village, Fairview area now. What a temporary station means is don't think of it as a large, elaborate, brick fire station. Think of it as anywhere from a manufactured home with a pole building to they actually do make some modular fire structures. They're very popular more in the California region where they'll move them into wildfire zones during the season. But so you're getting everything from, close to $1 million to multiple millions of dollars, but it's not tens of millions like a regular fire station is. But we really like the idea of investing in bringing more personnel and equipment here where there's a travel gap. So if you're paying more, you're also getting a bit more. We also are meeting as a region to figure out this problem. Again, most likely a district, which doesn't mean that your costs would go down. What I can say is everything else equal, that 911 and police don't go up dramatically. if we do pass a levy of $1.35, and then in a year or two or three, there's a fire district and it's in place, your taxes probably wouldn't change a lot because the city stance is public or general property taxes for public safety. So going back to this slide, okay, the fire is being paid for elsewhere. Take that off. We would only collect then property taxes to fund police and 911. And $1.35, it's not quite a net zero, but it's close. But again, that's going to be a few years. You also may have, seen some articles and newspaper articles about some disagreements that we had with Gresham about contract renewals and who's going to provide the service. Very happy to say we have a new 5-year agreement in place. So fire service is in place through June of 2031. So, and again, we're all working collaboratively together on this solution. So that noise is done and gone. We're working towards a solution, and in the meantime, you're protected. So that's, homeowners insurance, don't worry about that. Fire's not going away. We don't need to give insurance companies more reason to cancel. So all I say is we're working with our partners to solve this. So, yep, you probably, hopefully, at least got the postcard or phone call about the poll. If you didn't take it, that's okay. We also have a survey that's live right now. We'll be live for probably a few weeks. Just again, trying to get your feedback, your thoughts, your concerns on this. This will also be on our website, also on our social media. So if you hopefully you're on some kind of social media and you'll friend Wood Village. We do a lot of updates on there, but if not, that's fine. Go to our website. We always update that often with great information just about the city, but certainly then this survey specifically. So just another way to get your voice out there and heard. So with that, I think, is it Caroline will have a microphone. Just ask you to speak into a microphone if you have a question, so those that watch later can hear what the question was, and I'll do my best to answer it. Again, if your questions are pretty detailed or specific, I may not have the exact information. I'm not trying to hide anything. I just want to make sure it's fully correct. So again, if you have one of those questions, we just give us your contact info so we can send it to you later. If it seems to be a broad thing, we'll probably end up putting it on our website as well so more people can see it. So what questions, thoughts, or comments do we have? I am asking for everything. Just wait a second till we get a mic to you.
Is this more about improving services or closing an existing funding gap?
Both. It's both. So to close, it will close this gap, and then the city would essentially use savings to help buy down the cost of like a temp station in some of the equipment. Gresham has put together kind of a loose proposal of the additional personnel needed. It's not yet known how those costs would be distributed, but given it would be a smaller piece, the city could handle that portion.
Levy need to be, if it is only about closing the funding gap and not improvements?
It would be the same. Like I said, we would use savings. No, the improvements are coming from savings. They're not, I'm not sure I'm understanding your question, but the levy closes the gap, and we would be sending additional money. Correct.
That part.
Correct, because if we use it, it's all savings. So if we use it to close the funding gap, that is $1.35.
Be lower.
No, the levy to close the gap is $1.35. To enhance the service, the city will be using savings to do that. So $1.35 closes this gap only, but allows the city to use savings instead of using savings to close the gap. We're using savings to enhance the service. Not to the levy, no. But if we don't have the levy, we can't use those funds to enhance the service. Other thoughts, questions? I think from real quick, put the fire people on the spot. Did I do okay on the accuracy of how you respond?
Yeah, no, you did awesome.
because I don't respond. You don't want me to respond. But it's nice to know that, yeah, it was, again, a summary and a generalization, because again, all incidents are different, but it is a lot of personnel and training and equipment. Say even, I won't say even for a heart attack, those are serious. We want people to live through them. But that's what it takes to help achieve that. Yes.
But I guess my question, what happens at the 5-year mark if for any reason we don't meet project goals and there's no long-term solution that's in place?
Oh, that's a scary one. I didn't think if there wasn't the solution. Plus, I would say ideally, there's already a district in place and it would transition from levy, would get rid of the, let me start over. So we've passed the levy. We're continuing to work with the region and there's a district vote and it passes. We would then stop collecting on the levy at that point, and again, collect just for what we need for police and 911. That's pretty straightforward. The answer of, okay, we've passed this levy and everything falls apart. We can't come to terms of how to provide the service. I'll assume the temp station worked out fine, but now it's how do we pay for it? Again, I think we're kind of back in a similar situation. Ideally, it's, okay, there's no district, but we're in contract with Gresham, and we just have to explain what happened to you all again in 5 years, and hopefully that resonates with you. You've been happy with the service, so you continue to pay for it. Or it doesn't, and again, then we have to use savings and use that until we find a solution or until savings are gone and it's a very different story, which I know we've had some questions on that of, what just happens if the city runs out of money, and there really isn't a clear cut answer, because I hate saying it depends, but it depends, because it could be that people vote to essentially disincorporate the city, and then other cities could annex into it, so you're now part of another city. It could be the state takes over the finances, which gets odd, just because, well, I don't think the state runs much well. The other option could be that it, I won't say allows the rewriting of contracts, but my guess is it'd be a lot less service. Okay, if this is what's in the bucket, what does that mean then? And that gets harder with fire, because there are some things about like police and 911 that there has to be some kind of response that's in statute. Fire is not. So Gresham could say, sorry, city, like we just can't afford to serve you for what you can pay us. Or another district could say, sorry, city, we can't serve to, we can't serve you for what you can pay us. So then we go without fire service, which means then your property insurance either goes up or gets canceled. We also don't want that. Like I said, I hate saying it depends what happens, but again, that wouldn't be year 1 or 2. Whether it's, this May or, call it May of 31. But that's the bigger fear. That's the bigger concern, as then we're reducing services and looking forward towards what can we still afford that meets basic needs. So we're actually going to build this coming year's budget. So we budget, it's July 1 to June 30. So we're in budget season now. We're building it assuming it doesn't pass, because I'd rather be happily surprised than not. Again, probably, years 1-ish. I don't want to say years 2. We haven't really finished all of our projections yet. There are savings to do that. It's a rainy day fund. But again, projects used for savings, because maybe, we're saving for a new playground structure. Well, those savings go towards fire because we need fire more than a playground. Well, that means it'll be that much longer before other stuff happens again. I do want to mention, though, that like water and sewer, those are actually state restricted separate funds. They're called enterprise funds. Water can only be spent on water, sewer only on sewer. So that doesn't really change. It's not like, this didn't pass and my water bill is going up, 30%. Not related. But for like your property taxes and some of the franchise fees, that's how we fund what's called the general fund. And again, I like to believe we have some wiggle room, like, okay, let's say it doesn't pass in May. Well, we can still carry on and we'd want to learn why it didn't pass in May. What information didn't people have, or is it just we just can't afford it? But if it wasn't $1.35, maybe it was 70 cents, or we would just want to learn what the community is willing to accept. Probably at the same time, then getting very real about what services are going to have to be either cut, reduced, or restricted. And it's things like parks, recreation, the events, planning, and subsidizing building permit fees. And again, if you think of a question later, you can always feel free to email us, write a letter, pop into City Hall, take the survey. I know sometimes putting people on the spot is hard, and sometimes people are just here to listen. You think of things later. So we're always here to listen to your concerns. Maybe not even about fire, but you have a concern about something else. Let us know, please. Or a compliment. We like those too. Again, else? Yes. So fire is through Gresham Fire through an intergovernmental agreement. So Gresham every quarter sends us an invoice and then we send them a check. Police is through the Multnomah County Sheriff's Office. We've had that in place for over 50 years. We used to have our own. It was actually very bad. So we've been in. Correct. So, and then 911 is through it's called the Bureau of Emergency Communications. It's actually City of Portland Bureau, and that's done through state. We can't spin up our own 911 center. And yeah, because, I mean, we've had good relationship with all of them, whether it's Gresham, BOAC, or the sheriff's office, good longstanding relationships. Sometimes, again, whether it's 911 or like lately with fire, they just choices that they didn't want to make that cost all of you more money. Police has had that in the past. We're hoping that it's just kind of more standard, kind of inflationary increases, but we can't guarantee that. So again, for those who are going to watch later, the question was, there's some maps here that are a little different than the maps on the screen. Our consultant that did the fire study did those. The question was, is that station set in stone or is it just kind of placed there? What I can say for the map on the right, that was just placed there. That was just, we're going to plunk it in the middle of Wood Village, see what it does. For the station here, it's somewhere, they just picked a spot between Gleason and Halsey or Sandy on 223rd, because that was kind of like the central part of a gap where it's feasible that a station could go, because maybe there's some vacant parcels or some lots near there, draw kind of a quarter mile, half mile circle from 223rd and Halsey to Gleason. Somewhere in there would be a nice spot for a station, but there's not one necessarily picked out yet. We're having those conversations though, but that's kind of where the gap is. Oh, that was because it was more focused on for those maps, focused on the 3 cities, not necessarily the 4 cities. So where is it here? It's unfortunately, they're very small icons, but no, 71, there it is staying put. I think Gresham has longer term plans to actually, I think, move it across the street. So it has a shorter response time on the Eastman Parkway, but essentially 71 is there. It's good. Again, we're trying to add 2 more stations to the overall service. No, I think they're rebuilding the one, I don't know the number, but on Kane.
Fire department's gonna be right. Think about it that way, we're probably the best.
Also to that point, yeah, insurance went up, fuel went up, groceries went up. I mean, we know that, and we know this is a big ask. And that's why we want to hold these meetings with you all and just understand what are your concerns with it. Just so what, what, if any level is, the support for some additional funding to either, close the gap and ideally help improve the service is kind of, that's the hope. That's the golden dream. But it's not nothing also.
Yeah. Oh,
Yes.
picture.
So I will talk, I will do that in a summary form. I'm not sure our website still shows that, but we had some of that. I'll make sure we get information so people can see it, digest it. Let's make that note.
But,
Thank you, Chief. So prior to this current fiscal year we're in, we paid Gresham Fire about $560 some odd thousand. The renewal was $940,000. Because again, they couldn't offer called a value rate, marginal rate, average rate. They couldn't do it. We were at the end of a 10-year agreement, and they said we can no longer afford to give you that rate. They said, we've done a public safety, fee. We've done a public safety levy. We can't give you a discounted rate anymore. Made sense. We also kind of, we did a study. How else could it be served? Well, the next fire district that's actually in operation, well, they're $292 per thousand, so about the same price. Think, well, what about volunteer? Well, none of the three cities own any stations. We own no equipment. And volunteer doesn't mean free, so you could be spending as a whole about the same and not getting the same. But that's again where Gresham's like, yeah, we're in this boat too, so let's try to get all together and see what we can do to fix this. So it's about $940,000 this year, and then the rest of the 5-year agreement increases at 7.3%. So there's a 3% increase on property taxes. This grows at 7.3. So it Doesn't add up. Why are they going up? Mostly for fire. Police has actually been steady for response times. I don't have a graphic in here for police. For fire, response times it's the call volume. It's simply the call volume, and as the chief said, up until this population growth and aging community, as you can see, traffic impacts the response time, but also, as the chief said, up until this past year, they were working with almost the same number of people and resources. They're working with about the same number of firefighters and resources as they were 20 years ago. They just added, was it 12 more firefighters that you were able to add? Right. So, I mean, it's just been, I don't want to say cobbled together. Everyone's done the best they could with the resource and, population growth, traffic, something I don't get into in this presentation, but with that change property ratio, new construction doesn't pay for itself. So because a home isn't taxed at its market value, it actually demands more service than it pays in taxes. And so you either have to increase taxes or reduce service. Any one development is fine, but you start layering new and new development, and it's a state problem. It's not unique to Wood Village. And the state's actually put in other components where we can't stop new construction. We can't stop housing starts. We can't stop apartments. The state has said developers have that right to build almost whatever they want. And that's where if we can add, not just this station, but, the station on the south, that increases that overall reliability, because now you're not going too far out. If, okay, this station's got a call, well, great, this station is available. Well, this station on the call, great, this station. You're just getting better overlap. Mhm. So like I said, ideally, the four cities can come together, figure out what a district means and looks like. And as we're doing that work, we can't predict the future, but we're trying to take a 10-year window of, okay, if we start a district in, I'll just say 2028, for the next 10 years, maybe short of a capital ask, which is usually spread out over a longer period of time. So if it needs a few million, it's, 25 or 30 cents on your tax rolls, not in the dollars. But for that 10-year horizon, it's sustainable without asking for more resource. That's how we're looking at this. So again, we can't predict the future, but ideally it's for a foreseeable amount of time, no one's coming to you for more money. Well, let me rephrase that. The schools might, special districts might, but the city and the fire district are not. Again, don't feel like you have to ask a question if you want to be done. Yes. Used to. Grew up on Cedar Lane. Yep. So I was at this park before it was a park, where the playground was a sewer pipe. Actually, I think it was a storm drain pipe, but that's what I tell myself. Yeah, graduated Reynolds High School. Yeah, I don't feel like you have to ask questions. So if you've got what you want or think of something later, again, we're here, email, stop in, a letter. If you don't want to use a stamp, you can just drop a note in the payment drop box if you want, if we're not open when you think of your comment or question. Just, again, if you want a response, a phone number or an email, so we can either get you the information or, hey, it's available to pick up, or we can set up a time to meet and discuss it in more detail. So don't want to hold you hostage, but feel free to grab another snack or beverage on your way out, some information, and just anything else I can do while you're all here. Yes. Mm-hmm. Well, again, this wasn't about convincing a levy is a good thing or a bad thing or to vote for it. It's more of just why we got here and what we're talking about, what we're trying to do. And again, I think we've heard from some people, yeah, we want to know what happens if we don't get it, because I want to know the overall value. What are my tax dollars being paid for? And that's a very reasonable question. So we'll definitely get more information out there about that. I just never liked doom and gloom, but some people are like, well, no, it's real. And so we need to know what are the trade-offs, and we will get that information out as well. So again, hopefully you'll at least like us on Facebook, or at least search us on Facebook. Our website will have a lot of information. So we're here to serve and support you all. And I just, again, thank you for your time this evening, especially with the cold and the wind that just cuts through you like a knife.